Greetings and salutations. Welcome to the Dsgb Fantasy Football League Weekly Recap. I'm your host and commissioner, AST1. Before we get started, if you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button and follow me if you like content like this. Let's not waste any more time and let's get into the recap. Let's start the week off by giving a shout out to Captain Kirk Cousins, 1 week after a trade with menace to the league. The quarterback suffered an Achilles tear and will be out for the remainder of the season. Thoughts and prayers go out to Cousins and hope for a speedy recovery. You will certainly be missed on Hancock County, Georgia's fantasy football team. Now let's go over the league notes for Week 8. We are more than halfway through the season, and the playoff picture is heating up. Just like the league had a trading deadline that ended on Halloween, the Dsgb Fantasy League has a trade deadline as well. November 24th after Week 11, the deadline for all trades ends. Next, let's look at the projected playoff picture through 8 weeks. First, we have Menace to the league, currently the number 1 seed for Week 8. Menace as of Week 8 would have the bye week if the playoffs started now. Next, we would have the 5th seed, the Apocalypse versus the 4th seed Z-Boys, followed by the number 6th seed NY Giants versus the number 3 seed Bristol Vikings. And rounding out the playoff picture is the number 7 seed Hancock County, Georgia versus the number 2 seed the football team. Moving right along, let's look at the top 5 performers from Week 8 in fantasy. Number 5, we have Oklahoma Sooners product, quarterback Jalen Hurts. After a sluggish start to the game, Hurts rallied the troops and made a furious comeback against the Washington Commanders with his exceptional play. Hurts had 319 yards on 29 of 38 passing, with 4 touchdowns. Hurts had 34.6 fantasy points on the day. Number 4, we have the Clemson Tigers product, wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins. Hopkins, the wily vet, was an afterthought when he signed with the Titans this offseason, but when the Titans inserted rookie quarterback Will Levis into the game, an instant explosion surged through the offense and Hopkins was the biggest benefactor. Hopkins had 4 receptions on 6 targets for 128 yards and 3 touchdowns. Hopkins had 34.8 fantasy points on the day. Number 3, we have Mississippi State Bulldogs product, quarterback Dak Prescott. Earlier this year, I had given Dak his fair share of criticism for his lackluster play against top teams. However, yesterday that was not the case. Prescott was an efficient 25 of 31, passing for 304 yards and 4 touchdowns. Prescott also chipped in on the ground with 4 carries for 19 yards. Prescott had 35.9 fantasy points on the day. Number 2, we have North Carolina Tar Heels product, quarterback Sam Howell. Howell had a monster day in fantasy terms, going 39 of 52 for 397 yards passing with 4 touchdowns. Howell even chipped in a little bit of rushing with 3 carries for 11 yards. Howell had 38.1 fantasy points on the day. And number 1, we have Oklahoma Sooners product, wide receiver CeeDee Lamb. Lamb, who was drafted by Hancock County, Georgia, was part of the Kirk Cousins trade last week. Lamb so far this year has had a lackluster season in terms of fantasy. Of course, he was due for a breakout game, and of course, it came after the trade to menace to the league. Lamb torched the Rams early and often with 12 receptions on 14 targets for 158 yards and 2 touchdowns. Lamb had a dominating performance and had 41 fantasy points on the day. Shout out to the Dallas Cowboys fans, you had 2 players make the top 5 fantasy football performers list. Now let's take a look ahead at Week 9 matchups. First, we have 2 teams that have 4-4 records. The NY Giants versus Hancock County, Georgia. The NY Giants are coming off a crushing loss last week to the football team, where he did not get a complete team effort like the first 3 weeks of the season. NY Giants will look to bounce back against Hancock County, who is coming off a nice win over Crimson Ballers. Hancock County will try to rally the troops against a solid opponent. Both teams need this win to stay in the playoff hunt. Next, we have 2 teams that have 2-6 records. Team Harding versus Crimson Ballers. Team Harding is coming off a narrow defeat against Bristol Vikings. He will look for a repeat performance from his quarterback Sam Howell. Team Harding is looking to snap a 2-game losing streak. Conversely, Crimson Ballers came up short on his comeback against Hancock County. Crimson Ballers will be looking to get back on track and snap a 4-game losing streak. Both league managers need to win out to have a chance at a playoff berth. Next, we have the 1-7 Team Untouchables versus the 4-4 Dream Team Redemption. Team Untouchables is on a 3-game losing streak since his win over Hancock County in Week 5. Team Untouchables is up against the third highest scorer Dream Team, who is the victim of Menace to the league's onslaught in Week 8. Dream Team will look to right the ship and continue his push for the postseason. Next, we have two teams that have 5-3 records. The Apocalypse versus Bristol Vikings. The Apocalypse over the last 4 games has a 3-1 record. Last week, he came up short against Z-Boys with his star quarterback Patrick Mahomes played with the flu and compromised the Apocalypse team with a lackluster effort. On the other side, Bristol Vikings, since his Week 4 loss to Z-Boys, is currently on the longest win streak in the league with 4 and putting up impressive numbers. Bristol Vikings will look to extend his streak to 5, with playoff aspirations lined up in both teams' sights. Next, we have the 5-3 Z-Boys versus the 4-4 Summertime. Z-Boys, who is 4-1 over his last 5 games, will look to continue his current 2-game win streak. Z-Boys will continue to look for steady play from his quarterback Josh Allen and veteran wide receiver Adam Thielen. On the other side, Summertime ended his 2-game losing streak with a quote-unquote get-right game from Team Untouchables. He will look to end Z-Boys' 2-game winning streak and continue his push for the playoffs. And finally, we have what I will call the Dsgb Fantasy Football League's first game of the week.
To be the man, you've got to beat the man.
Unfortunately, I can't flex the game to a primetime slot like the league, but using my platform, I can highlight the game. We have the number 1 seed, the 6-2 Menace to the league versus the number 2 seed, the 6-2 football team. Since this is the only time, they will meet during the regular season. This is the tiebreaker game if they end up with identical records. Menace to the league is coming off the highest points scored game in the league so far this season. Both teams have injured players. Both teams have star players on a bye week. This should be a thrilling matchup with playoff seeding implications on the line. Hit the thumbs up button if you enjoy this content. Comment below who you think will win their matchup this week. Until next time, AST1 signing off.